Let Victoria. Okay. With that, let's go ahead and hop in and get started. My name is Eric Wengel. I'm one of the community managers here at the Urban Institute as part of the Partnering for Vaccine Equity Learning community. Welcome today to our first session of our project management training series. Today is the fundamentals of project management. I'm going to keep my intro remarks very, very quick and then hand off to our wonderful facilitators for the day. But before we go further, just a few quick key points about how the session will work. We do offer live interpretation from English to Spanish during our events. If you would like to listen to the Spanish language channel, please go ahead and click on the globe icon in the Zoom taskbar at the bottom of your screen. And then as with all of our learning events, we will post the slides and a recording of this event on our community website and circulate through the digests that go out through the CDC Managed Adult Vax Program listserv, which all P4VE members should be a part of and have access to. Now I'm privileged to introduce our facilitators for today. Kara Davis, Senior Director within the Office of the CIO at the Urban Institute, and Kashua Tao, Communications Manager for Fresno Interdenominational Refugee Ministries. And with that, I am going to go on mute, but I will be around in the chat if anyone has any other questions, but I will hand off to Kara.
Hi there. As Eric mentioned, I'm Kara. I'm in the Office of the CIO in the Urban Institute, and my background in project management is primarily in the tech space. So I also have Kashua here, who has been working on projects that are, well, she's also one of the grantees on your project, so she'll have some more real world experience to share. Just some expectations for this presentation. We're going to have a few activities where we're going to ask you to write some things down. So if you can have a notepad or a laptop handy, that would be helpful. We definitely encourage questions. If you want to raise your hand in Zoom or drop a question in the chat, we'll try and call on you. We might also call on you to share out some of the examples you've written down after each of the activities. So just listen out for that.
Morning or good afternoon. My name is Kashua Tao, and as Eric mentioned, I am the communications manager for Firm, but also the project lead for Firm's PAVE project as well. And for Firm, we develop culturally and linguistically relevant campaigns targeting the refugee and new arrival communities in 5 counties in Fresno, including Fresno. And we have partnered with school districts, local businesses, health departments, and other community-based organizations to really create an ecosystem supporting COVID-19 influenza uptake. For year 3, Firm was really focusing on training new influential messengers to really champion campaign messagings and to really train and develop new leaders in our refugee and new arrival communities. And for myself, I have about 3 years of project management experience. So very happy to be in this space with all of you, and I hope that I can share some insights that you can take back with you.
Great. So in this session, we're sticking to the basics. We're going to talk about key project management terms, concepts, and we're going to talk through how to structure sort of a very practical project work plan. I'm a big fan of simple templates. There are lots of very complicated project management templates out on the internet. And so I'm just going to highlight a few of the things that I find most helpful. So we've already done introductions in the chat. If you join late, please go ahead and type your name, role, your organization into the chat. And just to kick it off, I would love sort of a show of thumbs, whether you feel like you've got a ton of project management experience or maybe not so much. And so if I can get everyone to just sort of give us some indication, that would be helpful. Seeing. Some thumbs up, some thumbs down. Do you newbies? You old hats. Okay. And then the third question is just when you travel, I'm wondering if you're the type of person who makes sort of a detailed hour by hour itinerary, or if you're more of a play it by ear sort of person. And just to be clear, there's room for both in project management. We got a lot of play it by ears, couple itinerary makers. Okay. All right. So I like to think of the practice of project management as balancing those things out, right? So there's a lot of sort of big picture thinking that's really necessary, and then also some detailed planning that's necessary. And the tools that we're going to introduce kind of help you balance out maybe what isn't most comfortable for you. So you can use some tools to help you think about the big picture more if you're more of a detailed person, and use other tools to think about the details if you're more of a big picture person. So definitely no wrong answer there. We're going to talk through in this presentation what a project is, just some basic components and terms. Talk about project charters and go through some exercises there around thinking about the people, the value your project brings to them, and the scope and the big picture goals of your project. And then get into the detail stuff with project plans and how to break down the work to make it more actionable. Kashua, I know you introduced a little bit of what Firm does, but do you want to talk through additional project work here?
Yeah, just like I said earlier, so you do see a photo representation there of where we do our work in California, like I said, across 5 counties, and we do work with local health departments and also other community-based organizations throughout those counties. And so I will share a little bit more later about what kind of work we do, actual activities that we do to make sure that we achieve our goals, and also bring value to the projects that we run with PAVE. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the basics. What is a project? The key part of this definition is that it's time bound, right? It has a beginning and an end. We're not talking about programs that run the course of that you do over and over, work that you do every year. We're talking about planning for a specific scope. And a project creates value. So it's either developing a product, a service, or a result for the people you're working for. When we think about different components, you're usually talking about the people, who's involved, who's accountable for things, who needs to be involved in decision making, who are our stakeholders. You're definitely thinking about the project team you're working with, who needs to be on that team, your partners and your messengers that you need to make the project a success, and the clients and the communities that you're working for. When we talk about scope, we're thinking about the work breakdown structure, which sometimes people abbreviate as WBS, the goals, the deliverables that you've committed to. Schedule, you'll hear words like period of performance, milestones, thinking about dependencies, what has to happen before something else can start. And then when we go into budget, you're thinking about your personnel costs, any consultants, contractors, things that you need to buy. Other direct costs are things like, let's say, print materials and things like that. And indirect costs would be attached to labor. You'll see that in budgets as sort of a loaded rate. That would cover, the rent of your organization or some other fringe benefits, that kind of thing. So I think I mentioned the project charter as being the piece that kind of sets the big picture for me. It doesn't really need to be super complicated. Again, you're going to find a gazillion different project charter templates online. But I find it to be really useful to to put this into place to make sure that when you kick off a project, everyone's on the same page and shares the same vision about what you're doing and why, who you're doing it for. So I end up referring back to these value statements and vision statements a lot over the course of a project. When something changes, something goes wrong, we have to sort of reevaluate whether it still makes sense to do something in the same way. It's good to go back to that big picture and say, what were we trying to do at the beginning, and are we still going in that direction? So I'm happy to share a simple project charter template that I use after this. But the key components certainly are who are we working for, what's the value we're bringing to them, and sort of what is the scope of the project that we've committed to. So if we're thinking about the people, this is our first exercise. Think about who's on the core planning team, who do you need involved in order to get the project done? Outside of your team, who do you need around the community to help you meet your goals? And then the clients in the communities, who are you impacting? And so I'll turn it over to Kishua to talk about her example.
Yeah, so for Firm, our core planning team consists of myself, who is the project lead, and also community health workers. On our team, we had three community health workers and myself. We also call them community liaisons because we were putting the team together. We really thought about our refugee and new arrival communities, which communities really need to be outreached to, and which communities were the most in our counties that we're serving. And so our team consisted of a community liaison who spoke Arabic, one who spoke Samoan, one who spoke Hmong, and myself, I speak a bit of Hmong and Thai as well. So that was kind of like the idea behind it, to make sure that we were reaching as many communities as possible in the languages that they are most comfortable speaking. And outside of our team, those that really help us achieve our goals are influential messengers. We bring on a diverse team of influential messengers, whether they're other community leaders or other community-based organization staff, or if they are somebody who's really just popular in the community. So we've had a diverse team of influential messengers to really help us champion the message of our campaign, and also reach pockets of people that maybe our team can't get to or can't reach. And then other than our influential messengers, our partners really include, as I mentioned, other community-based organizations throughout the counties that we work with, or school districts, other health departments throughout the counties that we work for. And they've had really helped us create this ecosystem that has really worked really well in getting people information that's accurate for them to have in their hands. And who does our project impact? So our focus really is making sure that refugees and Leo Rebel communities are have access to information that's accurate, that it's timely, and that's also relevant to their communities.
So with this in mind, this is your first task, is to take just a couple of minutes and write down your own people on the project. So we'll give you just a couple minutes, and if you want to give me another thumbs up when you're done with that, we'll move along. Maybe just one more minute here. Okay, I'm going to move along to the next slide. If you haven't thought of everyone yet, that's okay. It's just an exercise to go through later. Because the next piece of this is thinking about each of those groups. What is it about the project that you're doing that brings them value that they need? So if I'm thinking about my partners or messengers, maybe I'm thinking about how to provide them with the materials that they need to share, that I want them to share in the way that they want to share them. So meeting with them and understanding how they communicate with their communities, what I can provide that makes their job easier. That would be the value that I'm providing to them. And my community, my clients, the end users of the product or the project, we're thinking about what it is that's important to them. And these are sort of going to be our guiding statements, right? So if we're working on anything in the project that doesn't do this, maybe it's extra, maybe it's not as critical as some other things. And also if we are developing things, we should always keep these goals in mind to think about how to make them better, or these value statements. So if you can write down a few things that you think that your particular partners or communities would get value out of in your project, then that's your next task. So take about 3 minutes here and go ahead and write down some of those. About 1 more minute. Okay. I would love to get some examples of your community partners or your communities and some of the value statements that you've come up with. So does anyone want to volunteer one?
I can share mine. So I work, with our public health department. We're working, I do multiple projects, but our current project is, working on basically to do for opioid users. We're getting Narcan kits out there, providing education. So basically our hope for our first community partner, basically the collaborative that we're working with is to try and, help give them additional resources for people, for those with substance use disorder, help reduce, overdose fatalities, and try and assist them in, coming together with like reducing stigma in opiates. And additional partners are usually our ambulance associations that we are going to be working with to get these kits out there. And our hope to offer them is a value of, as a community member, we want them to be able to know this information, get it out to the public, and will help them in turn reduce their call volume and reduce the number of like recurring patients for opiate use.
That's great. It's good context. Does anyone else have one to share?
So I can share mine. So we are getting ready to launch a vaccine campaign that targets children 0 to 5 years of age and early childhood education centers. So we are a local public health department. So we are partnering with our local immunization coalition. There's also a child care nurse consultant that works with the state that oversees, regulates the child care center. So we're working with her. We're also going to be working with some childcare staff members and working with our communications person, as well as some of our immunization nurses here. And our refugee resettlement center in our area also works with new refugees to help women obtain the certification that they need so that they can open up centers. So we'll be partnering with them too. And our goal and our value is to make sure that individuals know the benefits of vaccinations and they know who to contact when they have questions or concerns regarding vaccinations.
Great. So I feel like we got a good start here. I'm gonna move into scope. So thinking about the minimum project requirements, there are certainly like baseline deliverables that you likely committed to in your grant applications. There are products and services that you could create that maybe some of those value statements or thinking about who you're working with generated some ideas about other products that you might develop to fill in some gaps and make sure that value is reached. And then think about sort of the minimum features of each product or service that's necessary to provide the value, right? So we know that we have constraints. We all have to do things within a certain timeline, within a budget. And if we want a successful project, we're trying to make sure that it delivers the value that we think is needed. So trying to make sure that we're thinking about those really key pieces of whatever it is that we're building to meet that need is kind of important when you set the scope. So in this next exercise, lots of exercises here, guys. We want to take one of the value statements, and if you just think about all of your planned deliverables that are part of your project, map them to that value statement and think through how exactly they meet the value. How could you turn that statement into sort of a success criteria for the thing that you're building? And then surely look for missing or extra things or things that maybe you're trying to do a way more complex version of it than is necessary, where you might have some wiggle room down the road in case you're running out of time or money and you need to kind of redirect some resources. And I'll let Kashua again come in with a firm example here.
Thank you. And so one of the values we chose for today's presentation is we help refugees and neighbor family communities to stay informed about vaccines by creating equitable access to information. And so as you see, those are the activities that that we do to help us achieve that value. And so those include campaigns, communication products, events, influential messengers, and also partnerships with non-vaccine administrating organizations. And so some of the examples that I can give is that in terms of the events, we're making sure that we do in-person events so that we are meeting people where they are, and also being present at these events help us answer questions that they may have, and so they don't have to take the extra step of maybe seeing a flyer and calling us, but rather we're there in person, and so the access to information is immediate. And also for influential messengers, also bringing on board a combination of expert in our in specific fields, and also we also onboard everyday heroes that help us get the message across. And so we do about 15 influential messengers per campaign, and they help us not only answer questions like our experts. For example, we had a doctor who is Hmong, and that worked really well because we ran a workshop with him where we had attendees and he could answer questions. That was really helpful for people to see somebody who looks like them and who speaks their language, to really build that trust there. But then also bringing on board those everyday heroes and help us distribute flyers and continue to have conversations with friends and family or those in the network as well. And so again, making sure that more people get access to information. And then for our partners, an example that I can give is providing in-language information and flyers for them so they have that at their dispense. And also last year we helped one of our partners in a different county develop some materials for Ramadan. And Ramadan Mubarak to those of you who are observing during this month. And so we helped them create those materials to be distributed in the county that they were in, as well as translation, and also a bit of audience testing. So ensuring that there is access to information that is relevant to these communities.
And again, the idea is, sure, there are 16 communication products, but that's not meaningful in itself without the sort of what is it about the communication products that's providing the value. So I'm going to give you a few more minutes here to think through your products or deliverables and how they map to your value statements. I'm gonna take about 1 more minute here. Okay. Coming back, did any of you all have any sort of discoveries about missing or extra uh, deliverables that you might be able to like shift around a little bit? Any examples of just how you mapped your deliverables to a value statement?
I can share mine, Kara.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. No, you're good. So mine, I will admit, I have a little bit of a cheat because we're already kind of in the project that I'm working on, so I got a little bit of a heads up. But I felt that, especially since we are working with community partners to essentially provide them Narcan leave behind kits. Our deliverables are the Narcan leave behind kits. Our overall objective of our project is to kind of reduce the stigma affiliated with people with substance use disorder. So we need to deliver education, some resources to these partners so they can provide it to the patients that they interact with. And then we want to have a launch party just to kind of get everyone excited. I feel like this is kind of our like minimum. And I think in reality, I really just want to make sure we provide the quality products that we do leave them. Our education is high quality, and we make sure we leave them with some info so they don't feel like we just showed up, did stuff, and then cut and ran. Want to make sure we leave them with a good contact so we can keep that line of communication open for further questions, advice, maybe even expanding the project. So thought that was pretty relevant to my one goal.
Great. Thanks for sharing. All right. So this set of activities is usually what I go through when I'm doing the project charter. So thinking through what we've committed to, who it's for, and what kind of value it provides. So the next part of this would be getting into sort of the more detailed planning. So once you've gotten everyone together, you've shared the project charter, you're all on the same page, you start getting into the, okay, well, how are we going to make that happen, right? And so one of the first tools there that you'll hear about from time to time is this idea of a work breakdown structure, which is really just taking each of those deliverables and breaking it down into the pieces that you need to make it happen. So what's the step that we need to outline that can be budgeted for, that can be assigned, that can be planned, that we can put on our timeline to make this thing, give it a little bit more structure and give everyone a little more clarity about who's responsible for which piece of it. So this is just an example of those steps or those pieces that are small enough to picture with their own amount of effort, right? So this one, again, take one of your deliverables and just map out the steps quickly or the things that it would take to make that thing happen. Don't forget to put in planning activities and what you might need to do after you launch the project. So any sort of wrap up or debrief, as Kashua has an example of. Testing, steps like that often get missed in a project plan. And then you realize you haven't budgeted time for them. So try and write down everything you can think of. I'll give you about 3 minutes here. Okay, had to find my mute button. Coming back to this, I think Kashua has an example of one of her project deliverables to walk through.
Yeah, so this is an example of a project plan for how we train influencer messengers. And this is an example from year one of our project with Fave. And so the activities that has to happen for us to be able to train influencer messengers include identifying participants. We typically do that at a team meeting, talking through the campaign that we're running, which influencer messengers would align with that message, and then also who would be effective in reaching maybe hard to reach communities or pockets of communities that may be hard to reach for our team ourselves. And then also creating training materials for our influencer messengers. We have onboarded, like I said, experts in fields, everyday heroes, and also some of our clients that actually turned into influencer messengers. And so the training materials
Am I still here? I think I just lost Kishua.
You are, yes, Kara.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're
Okay.
back.
No. Okay. Maybe if I turn off my video for now.
Okay.
About that. Did we get to creating training materials?
You just started with that.
Okay. And so for creating training materials, we do either build on that depending on who our influential messenger group consists of. And so that training material may be different for each group that we bring on board. Reserving a space to make sure that there is a space for us to train our influential messengers where we can gather and get that training done. Thankfully at Firm, we do have a community room that we can use for that. But if you don't, look elsewhere and make sure that space is reserved for your activity. And of course, inviting participants to come to the training. And then after that first initial training, what we actually do is we do a weekly check-in with the influential messengers just to talk through maybe any things that they may need help navigating, any additional training, any additional resources. So we do weekly check-in with our influential messengers. And then also at the end of the period, we do conduct a debrief with our influential messengers, taking a little bit of surveying with them as well to help us build our training process for the next group of influential messengers. And so resources needed, I did some numbers there, and these numbers are really determined by how long we typically meet to help identify participants, or how much time is needed to run the event, how much time is needed to do weekly check-in. So that really helps determines those numbers there. And typically we do our trainings in person, and so we do provide snacks and light refreshments for our participants. Additionally, they do get a $50 gift card as an incentive for being an influential messenger as well. And then we use Google Form, which is free, to help us conduct our debrief with our influential messengers. Sometimes we do them together with influential messengers, and also we just send a link over, and so even if our schedules don't line up exactly, they're able to do the debrief on their own. And this process takes about a month, so from week 1 to us planning to week 4 of us conducting a debrief.
Great. So once you kind of like mapped out some of those resources needed and the tasks in your work breakdown structure for each deliverable, you can put together this sort of a timeline. There are loads of tools that do this. You can do it in Excel. This one's in Smartsheet. But the important thing here is to think about how many days it might take you to do certain tasks, and what tasks can't start till others are done. So those dependencies matter here. So if I can't really invite people until I've reserved the space because I want to tell them where to go, I certainly can't invite them before I've identified them. So mapping out those dependencies and thinking about how long it might take you to do things or what you can do in parallel helps with the timeline. The next sort of detail planning document I'm going to share is budget. These are not real rates. I chose $100 because it's easy to add up, but I used the 8 hours and the 12 hours to show the cost there. Usually in your budget, your rates for personnel are, you might know the unloaded rate, but you might have indirect costs that need to be added to that for a loaded rate. Your vendors, your other direct costs would be like the stacks and the gift cards. The Google form costs nothing. That's great. Add it all up and there's your budget. So that's what it would cost to run one influential messenger training. That's kind of how we're getting to some of our roll-up costs for the whole project. So just to kind of recap what we've done, beyond the charter, in building the project plan, usually I start with that work breakdown structure to say, okay, we've decided that these are the deliverables that meet the value for the particular communities or partners that we're working with. So for each of those deliverables, what does it take to make that one happen? Starting with the work breakdown structure, thinking about who needs to be doing it, what other resources we need, how long it's going to take, estimating that time, mapping those dependencies, trying to get to the detailed budget based on what you've mapped out. The next pieces, I mean, some of the other project planning documents I just wanted to go over if we had time, were the idea of identifying stakeholders or drafting the communications plans, doing a risk register to think about how things could go sideways over the course of a project. So I'm just going to show you some of those. Some of you may be familiar with this idea of a RACI chart. This is really something that I often use at the beginning of a project to make sure I'm thinking about who I need to talk to. It's sort of to start the beginning of my communication plan and my work plan. If you think of R as who's responsible for doing the work, accountable, who's answering for it, who's making sure it gets done. The really valuable columns for me in my planning is to think through who needs to be consulted or who might be able to help me plan something, and then who needs to know about it, who just needs to be informed about the work I'm doing along the way. So often people put together these charts. There are different versions of them, again, but they're sort of a helpful planning tool for communication. Then when you get into your sort of, okay, how is our project team going to meet and communicate with each other? Are we gonna have regular check-ins? Are we gonna have some offline, documentation space that we put stuff in? What about those stakeholders that we identified in the RACI chart? How are we going to meet with them and get their input? How often are we going to communicate with those people who need to be informed? Just at the end, sometime in the middle? So the online, offline, in-person communication plan is usually a good thing to sort of map out. And again, you'll hear sometimes about this idea of a risk register. So thinking through what could go wrong with your project. If you have the wrong message, are you having sort of a negative impact, right? Are you, if you haven't tested your message well, right, to see how well it's resonating, did you word something weirdly? Did you use the wrong example? So what's the risk? Make sure that you're testing all of your messaging to make sure that you don't have the wrong effect, right? That's just an example. Does anybody else have examples they want to share of risks or something that might have gone wrong in a project that you could share? I realize it's not always a comfortable thing to share things that went wrong. Anyway, this is really just an example of some project documentation where you could sort of start tracking that stuff and think about how you might be able to mitigate the risk. Make sure it doesn't happen, what you might do if it does. Crystal.
Yes, hi, good morning or good afternoon, I'm sorry. But I was thinking about, sorry, now you guys can see me. For a risk for us, are we sharing the risk?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, sweet. I was just thinking right now for our team, just to start off, we're from Luke's house, so we're from New Orleans. A risk can be for us that our community members are not able to read some of the stuff that we send out, because of the health literacy down here. Not sure if that's affected in other areas in the country, but we do like videos or we post a lot of like live videos when it comes to health fairs for us, including me and one of my other staff members, Natalie Gomez, that she's also a helper for me when I do content here in Luke's house. So we mostly do more like radio shows or just for patients to get to see our faces and like verbally hear instead of like read it. But yeah, that's what we do so we don't have this risk, you know?
Yep, that's a good example. Any Roberto.
Thank you. I just want to share quickly about what I perceive to be a risk. Our focus right now is on violence prevention, and we work with the CDC. So the focus is on preventing violence affecting or impacting youth lives. I'll just give you an example of the projects that we are working on right now. This is an educational campaign that involves the production of violence prevention videos with the community, in which we present testimonies from the community. And I think the risk for us, what I perceive to be a risk, is that we are often pressured by different entities to prove the efficacy of these campaigns, which is very difficult to prove violence prevention, scientifically. So it's like I see that we have the product, we have the partners, we implement the campaigns, and then it's very difficult for us to prove the efficacy of the work that we've been doing. Yeah, so that's basically what I identify as a risk.
Sure. And so is that something that you would then talk through with your grant partners and think through like how to present that final?
Yeah, I think that basically adds another level of complexity in my capacity, because the language that the CDC manages at the level of project management sometimes doesn't match the language that we use in our capacity. So sometimes it's very difficult to understand the language that the CDC is using for project development, implementation, evaluation, and reporting, and then make it real for the people doing the food work. You see what I'm saying? So sometimes
Sure.
for me, I see that disconnection on the way that they manage in the language in project management language to understand exactly what their expectations are. And at the end, after scrambling all of this information, somehow we present information to them. You see, but this process of making sense of the articulation of ideas to present to them is what is a little bit not very clear for us, at least in my capacity.
Sure. Eric or Leandra, is that something you want to jump in and talk through? I guess we can also leave that for follow-up
Yeah.
later.
let's
I
leave
do
that for
think
follow-up.
one of the mitigation scenarios though is to sort of then you would work on clarifying expectations and reporting needs to try and make sure that everyone's on the same page in that case. Does anyone have other questions about the risk identification? So I'm sort of at the end of my piece of this. I'm happy to take questions if anyone has questions for Kishua as well about how Firm has addressed project planning over the course of this grant.
Yes, Natalie, we will be sending these slides out. As well as a recording. It will be posted on our website after in a couple days.
Hi, Kishore. This is Devin Smith. I was wondering what software you all use to do your project management and just how you all coordinate across your teams.
Google Suite has been really useful for us. Because our work emails are Gmails, and so that has just worked really well for our team to just have everything in one place. So even with planning out projects, using Google Sheets and using Google Documents, just really communicating and using those free software for us to really track things, doing checkoff lists, that has really been helpful in making sure that we all stay on the same page and making sure that all the team have access to those documents, those folders that can be shared amongst all of us.
There's
I
a
hope
couple
that-
questions in.
What tools are you guys using to keep track of your project data? I do have a data specialist as well. Let me see. Give me just a second here. Yeah, so right
And then
now,
Nat,
really transferring a lot of our data over to, I believe it's called Looker Studio. And so that really helps us keep everything together in one place. And also, I think Looker Studio helps us, gives us the ability to actually do some really cool things with data, like putting that on a map or really putting just numbers and categories that actually looks really good, something that you can also publish to the public to see as well. And so also communicating externally as well.
and then I saw Natalie raised her hand. Natalie, do you still have a question?
Hi. Yeah, I was just gonna say that, or ask, I guess, to Kashua that we also use, our team uses Google Workspace as well, but we have a hard time like trying to manage our projects through there. We do share like a lot of docs, and we all have, you know, all of our files in the Google Drive. I don't know. We just are having a hard time and are trying to outsource different platforms, you know, while still using Gmail and all. But we're looking at like Basecamp. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of that program, but and then we've also tried looking into Airtable. So yeah, I'm curious about the project data platform that you were saying that y'all use at Firm.
I think you're on mute.
Did we lose Kashua?
I think we did.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Natalie.
That's okay. If anybody got the name of that platform,
I think she was saying Lucas Studio.
Lucas Studio.
I don't know how to spell it.
Okay.
I don't know that one.
I see someone said Smartsheet too.
We use Smartsheet here.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank y'all.
I'm seeing Hive. Yep, there are loads of platforms out there. I will say I've used Basecamp before. We use Jira, we use Smartsheet here. as long as everyone's in the space and is sort of agreed on how it's going to be used, I think that's the most important thing. I'm not sure there's one magic project management platform to rule them all. But certainly any recommendations to be shared would be welcome here.
Well, in the meantime, if anyone else doesn't have any questions, I'm going to launch a very quick satisfaction poll. Or I'm not, because I don't have access to it anymore. But that technical difficulty aside, if you are not yet registered for either of the two follow-ups into this training series, I have added them into the chat right now. Those links did not copy and paste, and apologies. Session. Okay, perfect. I believe the poll is being launched.
And I will say in that session 3, some of you who had questions about data tracking, Luis may be able to answer some of your questions there.
And that was session 2, and here's session 3. If you are not yet registered for either of those events. And additionally, we do have another upcoming event. There is no link yet, but it's a save the date-ish that I am sending you all now on COVID fatigue. Roberto, thank you so much for joining today. Kara, I'll throw it back to you if there's no other questions.
Yeah, I guess we'll just close it out. I'm sorry we lost Kushua at the end, but thank you guys so much for attending today. I know this is some of the basics, but I hope some of it was helpful, and we'll follow up with the slides, and feel free to ask any questions. Talk to y'all later. Bye.
Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you.